a recent conversation I had with my partner about what we're going to do with our old 4-metre punt now that we've got a bigger plate boat and we don't use this too often anymore. We're going to do a full rebuild on it, and it's going to be a boat that Sam can take out. She can take it out with a girlfriend, she can take it out with family when she's here. It's a really easy boat to handle, and it's a fantastic boat. We've got all the gear for it. It's just getting a bit old and a bit long in the tooth and looking a little bit tired. So what we're going to do is do a full rebuild on it and take you guys through every single aspect of doing a full rebuild on a tinny. The first thing we had to do was do a full strip on it, and as you can see, every single thing has been taken out. All the electronics, all the flooring, we've ripped all the wiring out, the engine's off, absolutely everything has been taken off this boat. Actually took a fair bit of work, and we've started to strip all the paint off the side as well. So as you can see, a whole heap of paint's been ripped off the side of it. We're going to take you through that too, because we actually use paint stripper and a little bit of elbow grease. We've got the flooring. Now this is marine ply. We're going to seal the marine ply, and we're going to cover the flooring in a brand new material that not a lot of people have been using, but the flooring's going to be real interesting. Going to get rid of the carpet. Now the engine's been taken off, and as you can see, the engine's just sitting here, my old 30 horsepower Yamaha, and what I've got that on is I've just got it tied to an old fridge trolley, so I can wheel that around as much as I like. I can put it in the shed if I need to, wheel it back over to the boat, do whatever I need to do. The other thing we're going to do with this boat that's a bit special is we're going to put a wrap on the side. Now I've done this hand drawing of a barramundi and Munster snags eating a lure. I needed my sketch to turn into a vector file that I can send it to the printers and we can get a wrap made up for the side, and I wanted our own design, so that's going to be that. We're going to take you through every single step of it. So the paint stripper I'm using is called Digger's paint stripper. It's an industrial strength paint stripper, well so they say, and it is pretty good. And all I do is, you should be wearing gloves and stuff like that. You can certainly, I certainly recommend you do, but all you've got to do is put a thick coat of paint stripper on the paint, and this bulkhead's a good example because it's nice and flat, where some of the other areas I've had to strip paint from has had welds and all sorts of stuff, and it's been really quite difficult. And another thing is, I've got the boat out in the sun because I just think that works a whole lot better. I'm going to give that paint stripper a minute, but you can see all that paint's peeling off quite well now. We'll just give it a couple secs. Okay, I've given it a few minutes, and you can see the problem I've had throughout the whole boat is you've got some areas that the paint stripper just doesn't want to really rip the paint off too well, but you can see the vast majority of it comes off pretty easy. That little bit there that didn't bubble up, it's just going to need a second coat. What I'm going to do when I finish it is I'm going to sand down the bits that didn't get all the paint off, but I'll put a second coat up on that and clean it off. But you can see it's pretty straightforward. I've got a few different scrapers, even one that's got a 90-degree edge on it to get into the corners, and that's pretty much it. But like I said, it's just a long job. So paint stripper and a really good clean down, and also a sand down, has resulted in the boat fully stripped. She's back to bare metal in most places. Now one thing I have done is I'm so grateful. I've got some really good mates that are very talented. I've got a guy, Ian's going to come and paint it with me, and Ian's been a spray painter for years. And I've just had another mate of mine, Frenchie we call him because none of us can pronounce his first name, and he's done some welding in the floor of the boat for me. Now Frenchie's a great welder. He actually is a boiler maker for a living on big heavy machines, and he over engineers everything, and that's one thing I like about him because I like to do the same. So he's got these extra ribs in here for me, and also the keel just there and a couple other old repairs. He's gone over them to make sure that this boat's going to be Mickey Mouse. So before I put the floor in, that's all been welded up. So now we've just got to go and work on the floor. So now that we've got the boat all stripped and I've got my marine ply here, I'm going to cut all this to shape, and we're going to put EVA foam flooring on, which is or foam decking on. It's not really foam. I don't even know what the material is. But have a look at this. This is, you see it on a lot of yachts, you see it on a lot of luxury boats. But EVA flooring, a little bit different to carpet. Carpet, I live in the tropics, and today, for instance, it's what, 36, 37 degrees, which is normal throughout summer, and this is a build up to our wet season. So I need a flooring that's quite cool, and I need a flooring that's quite durable as well. Carpet gets so hot, and I think EVA flooring, from what I'm told, is a lot cooler under the feet. It's waterproof. We do have to seal this board up, and we have to cut it all to size. So let's go through that to set up the flooring in the boat, and then when the EVA flooring gets here, we'll lay it on this and we'll see how it goes. This will be interesting. First thing I've got to do is all this old flooring. I'm going to rip the carpet out. I'm going to use this as a template for the new flooring. So just rip all this carpet off. Easier said than done. And all that becomes my template. So my first bit of carpet pulled off. I didn't realise that the floor's actually getting quite rotten. The boat's probably 20 years old and showing its age, but that'll still work as a really good template. So I'll keep going. So I've made a lot of progress on cutting out the decking. I've used marine ply. I'm going to seal the marine ply as well. So there's a fair argument. A lot of guys don't use marine ply. They'll just seal this stuff with a good coat of paint so water doesn't get into them anyway, and that's fair enough too. I actually got given this marine ply, so thanks very much, Robbo. That was great, cost me a carton of beer, but worth every cent. Now I am going to seal it to give it more protection. You can just use a standard paint. You can't use anything oil based. I'm just going for a natural timber look because I like the look of it, but this will seal it, give it even more protection, and then I'm going to put the EVA flooring on. So see how we go. So here we are, the end result. I've treated all these bits of timber. They're still a little bit sticky, even though they're a couple of days since we treated it. And you can see where it's just pretty rough. It's pretty thick on the edges. But if I peel some of this off, you can actually see it's a real rubbery type of covering you get on it. So I'll sand these edges down a little bit so they won't peel off, because that's the last thing I want. But what it gives it is just that extra protection, and it is going to be covered, but the edges you might be able to see with through the EVA flooring, because it won't go to the very edges, and I'll round the corners off a little bit. But we'll get the flooring on this. I'm going to sand it down before I put the EVA flooring on so it sticks a little bit better, and give it a good clean. And yeah, let's do that. That doesn't turn out too bad. So one of the problems I found, I've got my front deck piece here, and the middle floor actually split right down the middle, so I could get one sheet on one side, one sheet of this EVA flooring on the other side. But for this front deck, you can see the sheet won't cover it, so I'm going to have to put two sheets on. And the tricky bit is going to be to make it look like it's all one sheet. So I'm going to cut one right in the groove, and the other sheet I'm going to cut on the other side of the groove, so that when I put them together, it looks like it's one universal sheet. And we can show you how we do that. So now I've cut that bit to the very edge. This next bit I'm going to cut to the other lip, so that we get this universal pattern throughout the whole, and it looks like it's seamless. Now, a couple of things I recommend you have: a nice big long stainless steel ruler, so you can use it as a guide to cut nice and straight. A good quality Stanley knife, or in Australia we call them Stanley knives, but box cutters or whatever you call them, and heaps of blades. So these Stanley knives that we have here is got a little blade holder, and there's two different size blades too. For most box cutters, that's the same, and these longer ones I worked out are a little bit better for cutting the trim around once the board's already on. But these little short ones are perfect for doing these cuts on the glass. All right, so after a bit of work and cutting that out and keeping it nice and straight, I have that uniform look. I know that my hatch is not cut dead straight just there, but when the new hatch goes on, when the lid goes on, I'm going to keep them very uniform, so that's still going to look very straight. But that's nice and neat. I just got to keep that uniform line all the way through the whole boat. And that's the easy bit. And the final job, it actually turned out really good. It's nice. It feels really nice under the feet, this EVA foam flooring. And I even put a ruler here that you can see I can actually measure the fish on the deck. The reel is a slightly different colour, so I kind of like that. It breaks it up a little bit. My hatch is still there. Look, I haven't screwed anything down yet because I've got a mate of mine coming to do some welding. We're going to reinforce the floor a little bit more. We've got some painting to do. We've still got a whole heap of work to do with this boat. But so far, that flooring doesn't look too bad. Any chance you're telling us what, seeing as you're the welder for the boat, what have we done to enhance the strength of the old bluefin?
So inside we've fixed up the ends which have broken off the floating ribs, and on the outside, on the top, we put in some longitudinal stiffeners to give you some more, take the weight when people are standing on the timber and stuff, and plus it'll stiffen up the frames a bit more, give it a bit more strength.
So these floating ribs, they're not designed to be welded to the 3 ribs that run through the middle of the boat. They float down the middle of the floor, don't they? The
float is the actual hull floats against the bottom of the rib.
Yep.
Yeah, so it can move against the rib. The rib stays staunch, and the thing, it's just this thing here is just to give you a bit more strength here and strengthen up these frames that you've got going through the inside of the...
And we did find a crack up the back, which we're going to have to work on the trailer to get the trailer right. So that doesn't crack again, aren't we?
Yeah, so in the trailer, you've got your runners on the trailer. So the runners on the trailer have to pick up as many of these ribs as you possibly can. So if it sits in between 2 of these ribs, it's not going to carry enough weight. The weight of the strength is in these ribs. So you want to pick up as many of these ribs with your runners on the trailer as you possibly can.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So that makes a lot of sense. So we're going to do some work on the trailer later on.
Yeah, mate.
And we'll sort that out too.
Yeah, sure.
So still got a lot of work to do. And the boys are doing a great job. Ian's over here mixing up the... What are we doing? We're doing the epoxy first? Epoxy.
Then acrylic, then the finish coat.
And I got no idea what they're doing, so thank God these guys are here to help me.
That's all good fun.
And you mentioned that you've got a little trick to keep the air, because it's so humid. We live in the tropics. I know some people watch this channel from overseas, and they have to shut their boat down over winter because the lake freezes.
Of course.
And I got no idea what that's like. It's got to be 37, 38 degrees today. It's raining. We're in the tropics.
We're perspiring.
And so, explain this hose to me.
Yeah, you just run the hose up to stop any condensation and moisture coming out the gun at the other end and wrecking a good paint job.
Yeah, so if you're in the tropics, that's a great little tip. Ian's been doing this for a long time, knows, and been doing it in the tropics. So the hose goes up to the roof there, and all the condensation in the hose stays in that bottom half. And of course, there's a water catcher in the compressor as well. So we've got it doubled up. We've got the boat taped up, and we've wiped it all down with get our fingerprints and everything off it. So time to start painting. So let's get stuck into it. So what's going on in the background? We've got the epoxy going on first, and what that is it's something that makes the paint bite into the aluminium. So the epoxy goes on, that forms our base coat. We put a primer over the top of that, and then we're going to put 2-pack white over the top of that. So a fair bit of work involved and a heap of prep involved, but if you're going to do it properly, or if you're going to do it, you do it properly. So what I always thought was electrolysis, but it's not even electrolysis, is it, Frenchie? It's just bad cohesion for the paint.
Bonding between the aluminium and the thing. What people don't understand is that aluminium is porous, and it accepts all sorts of different things into it. Like when you get a crack in your boat and you fill it with Sikaflex, poor old Boilermaker that has to fix that crack. People don't understand that the Sikaflex oils and the Sikaflex and stuff absorbs into the aluminium, and for the guy to fix it, he has to cut that whole section out and put another plate over the top of it. So the same goes with the paint. The aluminium absorbs all sorts of different elements of the paint, and the paint bonds or doesn't bond, and that's where the areas you see electrolysis of paint chemicals.
The 2-pack on now, and it looks absolutely amazing. it's out in the sun in probably 40-degree heat, so it's probably 50 degrees on that surface.
Probably hotter than the oven should be.
So we're baking it. And it just looks amazing. So, yeah.
Here's hoping.
Here's how, see how it sets.
Here's hoping it dries.
It's like a good cake. It's just got to set perfectly. So I've got a beautiful coat of 2-pack paint on this. So now we're ready to put the flooring in. Start wiring this thing back up again, get all my gear in it. And I'm even going to get the wrap on this afternoon. But before I put my floor in, I've got all this foam, this closed cell foam that's got to go in the boat. Now, if you ever wondered why your boat has got all this foam under the floor, it's actually regulation. In Australia, I'm not sure what the regs are overseas, but in Australia, boats sold after, I think it was about 2006, had to have basic flotation. Now, there's actually 3 types of flotation you'll hear. You'll hear basic flotation, level flotation, and positive flotation. Now, most boats are just built to basic flotation. And then what that means is that some part of the boat, if this thing capsizes, some part of the boat will float above the water. Usually you'll see, if you ever see rescues on TV and stuff like that, the boat's what we call turtled over, where it looks like a turtle sitting in the water with its shell exposed and everyone holding on to a capsized cabin or capsized hull. So that's basic flotation. What level flotation is some boats are built to specs where they'll sink down to the gunnels and they'll stay upright. So you can actually still sit in the boat, you know, theoretically, and the boat will be level with the water and won't sink or won't flip over. However, it's been proven many times that those tests are done in very calm water. They're done in swimming pools, I think, to actually make level flotation, and throw a few waves and stuff in. You may not be sitting in the boat with it actually sitting level. But what positive flotation is they generally inject the hulls with a special type of foam, which actually means the boat can, in some cases, the boat can be cut in half, and it's closed cell foam, so it doesn't absorb water, and the 2 halves will actually float away. That's specifically for surveyed vessels and stuff like that, not for recreational vessels, although you can do it. So foam, really important. Now let's get this forward. So last night we got the wrap on, and I'm sure you'll agree that it just looks amazing. We've still got some trimming to do. It took a long time to get it on. I had another mate, Ian, who used to do signs for a living, which is really handy. I've got a mate that has helped me out with every aspect of this boat, which is so good. But look, I won't go into how to get a wrap on the boat because I won't pretend to be an expert on it. There's heaps of videos on getting a wrap on a boat. But I've got to say that being an old boat, this boat was, this boat's 17 years old now, going on 18 years old. It's got a big ding in the side here, and we had heaps of trouble getting air out of that ding. We still have got a bit of air in there that we need to get out, but it's the type of vinyl, and if you're going to get a wrap done, get it in the vinyl that is actually porous. You can actually work the air bubbles out from underneath the vinyl, because we will get the air bubbles out of this. The other tip I've got for you too, you'll notice that there's no rego and there's no name on the boat. We've left that intentionally because the wrap can be hard to get on dead straight, and sometimes you have to work it, and Ian did have to work this a fair bit. And if we had the rego and the name written on the wrap as well, then getting that straight is almost impossible. So we got the rego and the name separate. So once we get the wrap on, and once we're happy with it, we put the rego and name on nice and easily. But that's the wrap, and I think the wrap's looking really good. Now I will have this in a separate video of just completely on just how to mount a Minn Kota, but just really quickly for this boat rebuild, I can't recommend this enough, but a quick release bracket makes the world of difference. But there's a couple little tricks with a quick release bracket. We also need to set up a little wiring harness to go from the upper deck down to the lower deck with these Anderson plugs. Reason being, if you've got the wiring harness, you've got to unplug it from the battery all the time, feed it up through the deck. If you have an Anderson plug there, you can just quickly unplug it. The Anderson plug is going to come in underneath the deck here, and you can just unplug it, remove your electric motor, put it back on whenever you need to, which is great if you've got to park it out in the road or something like that. You need to take that off overnight, click it back on in the morning, it takes 2 seconds. So first thing in putting electric motor on, get a quick release bracket on your thrust plate. Now the wiring harness that comes with your electric motor, is just has the wires coming off the front of the motor, but because we've got a quick release bracket on this one, we've got Anderson plugs. Now, Anderson plugs or whatever, something similar to that, just allows us to really quickly and easily plug and unplug that electric motor. So with the Anderson plug, I'm going to drill a hole through the floor so that I can just unplug the motor, lift it off its quick release bracket, and I can stow that, especially if I've got the boat parked on the side of the road overnight or something like that. I don't want anyone stealing my electric motor. So you just quickly unplug it, stow the electric motor away. It's also great. I use this boat along dirt roads and stuff like that where I live. So I take the electric motor off, put it inside the car, cover the boat, and then when I get to the fishing spot, it's a 2-second job to plug it straight back in. Now, these are the easiest things in the world to set up, but the only way you're ever going to get it wrong is if you don't use a really good quality waterproof circuit breaker for these things. Now, they cost you about $100. This one's a 60 amp waterproof circuit breaker, but all I've got is that main positive wire going through to the circuit breaker, and that goes to the battery. And the other thing I can do, when I charge my batteries up, I charge it straight off the battery with 2 alligator clips. So I can just crack that circuit breaker. That disconnects the battery from the electric motor. And then once I've got it all charged up, straight back in, clip that straight back in again, and I'm ready to go. And of course, I've just got my negative going straight to the negative terminal of the battery. Now, I do have other accessories in this boat, but I never wire accessories up to my electric motor battery, because my sounder in particular will get a lot of static on it, and I just want my electric motor battery to be isolated. But you can, if you want to, run all your accessories off your electric motor battery as well, but you will get a lot of static in your sounder and stuff like that. So I recommend just having a standalone battery, but it's up to you. But that's a simple wiring harness. So let's drill a couple of holes in the floor to get it through and just wire it up. So I've just measured out where I want my wiring to come through, or my Anderson plug to come through. So I've drilled a little pilot hole, and now I've just got to drill quite a large hole through the deck. So pace to measure and measure again, just to make sure you're right every time. So this is straight through that EVA frame flooring. So now that hole's drilled, you notice it's quite a bit smaller than my Anderson plug. So, and I do that intentionally because I don't want the Anderson plug to fall through there. I just want it to have the wires through and the connection to be on top. So once again, I can unplug the electric motor and use that quick release bracket to get it off. So with these Anderson plugs, they're a little bit tricky, but you just got to get your little screwdriver up under that lip to lift it up, and you can pull them straight back out again and clip them straight back in. So let me just muck around with that for a minute. So once she's all done, before I put the deck back on, I just want to feed those wires back through. Make sure my positive and negative go to the right spot. There's a positive and negative clip on that plug. And how these work is that little lip goes up onto a little oh, I know it's a bit of tin or something like that clips it all into place. So feed it through and she'll go click. This one will do the same. Make sure that's negative. Yes. Make sure I've got it around the right way. Push it through and click. There's my click. And that's my hole through my deck done for my quick release bracket. So get this deck back on and we'll wire the rest up. Now, the other thing that's important with some electric motors, and mine's the Minn Kota iPilot, which is GPS enabled and all that sort of stuff. It does have what we call a heading sensor. Now, the heading sensor is important. It just gives the boat, or gives the electric motor, a bit of an idea on what the boat's doing. So if I want to track due north, if I found a nice fishing bank I want to throw lures along, I can hit the north button and it'll track really nicely along that bank as long as I have a heading sensor on there. You can operate these things without the heading sensor, no problem at all, but They don't track true north, they go a bit wild. It's really worth just throwing these on. Now the heading sensor just wires up straight to the battery. They're very fine wires, so just be really careful with them. But it's a really simple install. But once that's hooked up, and once this, I think it's a red light from memory, it's a red light starts flickering. Once you've turned the min coder on, it means they're talking to each other, and you'll get a much better, especially true north direction, and better anchor hold as well. So, you know what, heading sensors worth throwing on. So electric motor goes back on. I put my clamp back in so I don't drop it. Then it's a simple case. I've got my wiring harness here. I actually have quite a large thruster plate on this, so I can tuck all that in there. And my bit that we're already fed through, put it straight back in. And I'll actually might even cable tie that a little bit so it's a bit neater. Then all we need to do, because I've got my my circuit breaker, so that's a 60 amp circuit breaker, wire that straight up to the battery, and also need to wire up the heading sensor straight to the battery as well. Then that's it. Electric motor's done. I haven't got a battery in this yet, otherwise I'll show you. But once we've got it all set up, I'll turn it on. I'm going to show you how to rig up the sounder. The sounder is really easy too. It's a reinstall, so it's not a brand new install. So you'll see that I've actually got the wiring harness and everything all set up, but it's exactly the same principles. Getting the transducer hooked up to the sounder and getting this run up to the negative terminal to my little fuse box here. So it's got a fuse and it's got a switch on it. I actually think this is really important because if you wire your sounder straight up to a battery without having an on and off switch, you can put your cover on and accidentally turn your sounder on and drain your battery and also damage your sounder. So I like to have an on and off switch. Plus it's a fuse in there as well, which gives me a little bit of peace of mind. So let's get into it. Now the old sounders are really, really simple to wire up. The first thing we've got to do, or you can do it second or first, doesn't matter, but in this case we're going to do it first. We're going to put the transducer on. So I've already got a bracket on the back of the boat, but if you don't, I highly recommend you buy a proper transducer back bracket and pay someone just to quickly weld that on for you. But you'll see the transducer on these things is quite large compared to a lot of transducers. That's because it's got the side scan and everything on it, so the transducers are a lot bigger. Now, the other wiring harness I have here is just simple power on and off. So this is already wired up because, like I said, it is a reinstall, not a brand new install. So I've actually got in this boat for all my wiring, I have a bus bar, and I'll explain that in just a sec. And I also have my switches down here. So that long negative cable goes to the bus bar, and this one here, that just plugs straight into one of these switches, so I can just turn this on and off from the switch as well as from the main unit as well. And like I explained, that's just a little safety feature too, so you won't accidentally leave this on when the cover's on, but it also gives me a fuse to protect this. So getting the transducer on is pretty straightforward, but once I get this on the water, I'm going to show you a system that I'll use to make sure I get my transducer perfectly flat so I get the optimal readings when I'm looking for fish. So at the moment, we just want it to run off the bottom of the boat, and really importantly, in between some of the folds in the aluminium as well. You don't want to get your transducer where there's a fold, because it's going to throw a lot of bubbles up underneath the transducer, and air underneath the transducer is the reason why you can't read your transducer at high speed. So minimize the amount of bubbles. I even get sandpaper sometimes and really work on smoothing off the welds a little bit. So I've already done that to this boat, so we don't have to worry about it today. So as long as that runs nicely underneath, just underneath the boat, so I'm not going to get any bubbles under it, that'll work really well there. So I'll lock it there, and then when it comes to getting it in that perfect position, I'll show you that a bit later when we get it on the water. Now, a very easy way to keep your cable nice and neat is just to have these little clips and a couple of screws in a couple of holes in the side of the boat, so you can screw them down. And I've got one just near the transducer to hold it in place down there. And I'll screw that one in place there, and I'll just pull that nice and tight. And that just keeps that nice and neat. Now with these transducer wires, obviously they're made for different size boats, and this boat's only 4 meters long, so I'm not going to need very much of that wire. So I'm going to measure out the amount of wire I need to get to the head unit. Then I'm going to wrap all this up in a really tight ball and put some cable tie around it, and I'm going to feed it down here and lock it into the side of the boat, just nice and neat with some cable tie, and that just tucks that away and just makes it all nice and neat. What I've actually got rigged up here is my battery, my head unit for the sounder, and just to show you how this works. Now, why I have a negative terminal bus bar on the back of this boat is because all my negative wires just run straight into the bus bar. So the power that's going to this sounder unit, which I've just got the power cord plugged in, not the transducer, has the negative going down to the bus bar. And this little clip here is my positive wire for the sounder. So what I'm going to do with that is plug that into where it says sounder, which is this top one here. I'll just plug that straight in there. And now that's plugged into this side here. So that's this power wire. So this power wire I'm just going to put straight into this battery. I'll set that there so you can see it. And if I set that on my battery there, I'll just screw that down so it locks it in. Gives me a bit of power. So what I end up with is the negative terminal for my sounders on my bus bar. The positive terminal is clipped into my four-way switch or my switch unit. And now what I've done is the power cord for the switch unit that's coming off the fuse is now wired up to the battery. Now the sounder won't turn on if I try to turn it on because I need to flick my switch which says sounder, which is this one here. Now I flick that on. Now I try to turn my sounder on and just give it a second and it lights up and powers on. So look, don't be confused by them. You do have to run a separate negative wire. There's no negative wire going to the back of these, and that's why I highly recommend you put a bus bar in your boat. Just put it somewhere near the battery terminal. Then you just run a really short battery wire. I actually had one here that I just took off the battery that I use all the time for this one, and it just keeps it really, really simple. So everything positive goes to here, everything negative goes to the bus bar. Easy. And if I switch that off now, the sounder will just switch straight off. So to make it really easy, all I do with these switches is I wire the two wires together. So the two wires that are on fuses, wire them into a decent wire. It doesn't have to be too strong, but I keep it fairly thick and run that straight to my positive terminal on my battery. And that way, everything I plug into this is just going to work off the switch and every negative just runs to the bus bar. A great little trick for when you're wiring up your boat is I've got these solder connectors, and they come in all different sizes. There's little box of them that I bought here, and they're actually shrink wrap with a little bit of low temperature solder there. So if you just thread your two wires together, here's one that's already soldered up. But with this negative, I've actually just screwed the two wires together. I'll show you what I mean. We grab the wires and just wrap them together like that. And you don't have to be too fussy with it. And put the solder over where the wires have wrapped together. And then I use a heat gun because the solder melts at such a low temperature that even a heat gun works. Now the heat gun will shrink the shrink wrap pretty quickly, but give it some time until you notice that solder actually starts to shrink around that wire as well, which it's doing right now. So it is a really low temp solder because it does solder quite well. And that solder is now wrapped around that wire quite nicely. and you've got a really stable connection there. So you've got a waterproof as well as a bit of solder on it. Now I'll show you how I clamp these little things onto these wires. This is going to go to the bus bar, so that's just a little connection to go over the bolt on the bus bar. And I need to make these waterproof, so it's really important that first of all I just crimp that straight on there so it doesn't go anywhere. Make a really good crimp, and that's nice and tight and not going to go anywhere. So now I need to put some heat shrink on it. Now my first tube of heat shrink pushes up into the crimp, so you can see that that disappears right up into there. Then I have two more actually. I have one here that I'll run them straight down, and they're the three different sizes. And look, there's a reason for my madness, so bear with me. This first one doesn't quite go over the crimp, so I've got a thicker one to go over, and that covers the fact that that's a red crimp as well, because we're actually doing a negative terminal there. So all three of those I need to bite in, so when I get my heat gun, they'll bite in just nicely. Make sure you put your heat gun up as well. I've made that mistake before and I've burnt holes in the carpet. So that's what that ends up looking like. Now, I've mentioned it before, the only thing I'll do at the end is I'll go around with my soldering iron and I'll just put a dab of solder just on the end of that to make sure it's sealed and I can't get salt water up there either. So that's a basic setup on how you do a crimp and waterproof it. One thing I have to do is run the lights from the port side over to this starboard side and down into my four-way switch and the negative off to my bus bar. So I do have to run it underneath some of the framework. And one thing I found that's really helpful is these little clips here. They just stick on from the back, but what they do is they allow you to put a cable tie just through there and cable tie up, whether you've got conduit or whether you just got straight wires. I'd recommend a bit of conduit, but I actually put the conduit between the two because I put one on each end and run the wires through it. But what's really important is make sure the boat's really clean beforehand, otherwise they come off. But I find a little bit of wax and grease remover and a nice clean rag, give it a really good clean. And the ones that I stuck on here years ago are still stuck nice and firm, so I just have to run another couple because I changed the positioning of the wiring. Instead of running all the way down the boat, I'm just going to run it underneath the deck. So these little buggers, don't even know what they're called, but they're awesome. The other thing I'm doing here is I'm setting up my lights, and it's really important you buy the right lights for your boat. These lights are mounted on the side of the boat, so they're side mount lights. If you have lights, and a lot of tinnies have them mounted on the gunnel, you need to get top mounted lights. And the reason that is, and I've done a video on it, if you want to go back to boat lights, have a look at the video and it shows you exactly how it works. But here's a quick idea on what you're supposed to see when a boat's heading directly towards you. And if that boat moves off to the port side, which it should actually move towards starboard, so you pass port to port. So let's say it moves to starboard, you'll lose the green light and you'll just see the port light. And when you're watching a boat move towards you, it's really important those lights are correct. So make sure you got the right lights, whether they're side mount or whether they're top mount. When I was doing my wiring, I spoke about the bus bar having one wire that's connected to the battery and all the other negatives are just connected straight to the bus bar. But I've changed that slightly because I've put a battery isolating switch on this boat. So now the bus bar is going to be connected to this. And how that isolates the battery is quite simple. If that goes to the bus bar and the other end goes to the battery terminal, as soon as I turn this off, there's no connection. It breaks the connection. So the bus bar is not earthed. So if the bus bar is not earthed, I've got no current running through the boat. Therefore, that battery is isolated. Look, that's how I've set this isolating switch up. There's a lot of ways to do it. I don't know if one way is better than the other. If you do, and you're not a dickhead and you want to write into me and tell me exactly why one way is better than the other, I'd love to know. So please leave a comment. But there's a few ways of doing it. for all intents and purposes, I've just isolated my bus bar. So therefore I'm isolating the battery because I'm cutting the circuit. So there's no current running through the boat. Now, the reason why I put it on the battery box, and it may seem pretty weird, is because this bulkhead here is all full of foam and it's all sealed in. So I've got to actually chock a block full of foam. I can put wires and stuff through there and put a longer negative wire onto that battery, but if I just bolt it onto the side of the battery box, it means I have to screw less holes in the boat itself, and I'm not, you know, threading wires and stuff through the foam on this bulkhead just here, and I don't have to have an isolating switch hanging out the side. So I think it's a little bit neater. But rigging up the battery box, because I've got a couple of nuts and bolts sticking out the side of this where I've tied the isolator switch on, I've just cut a simple bit of ply, and I'm going to put that between the isolating switch and where the battery goes. I'll just stick this big bugger in. That drops straight in there, and that protects the battery from those bolts sticking out so it doesn't rub into the side of the battery, and it makes a bit of a snugger fit in the battery in this battery box as well. So let's throw it in the boat and I'll show you how it's done. So now it's a simple case of lifting this battery into the battery box, or the battery frame that I've got here, you can see now. So I've got one of the cables connected to the negative terminal of this of the battery, and I've got the other cable here that's just going to go straight onto the bus bar. So this one here, straight onto my bus bar like that. And as simple as that, the isolating switch is up and running. Be very nervous, but we're drilling a hole in the side of the boat. French is reaming it out because we're going to fit a bilge pump through this one. And I've already wired the bilge pump up. And if you're going to fit a bilge pumps are really, really straightforward. You can buy a bilge pump kit. The bilge pump kit comes with the tubing, the through hole fitment, a couple of hose clamps. This one here is a 1 1/8 bilge pump kit. Just be careful, a lot of smaller bilge pumps only 3/4 inch piping. But we're going to pump that through, and also I'm just going to secure the pump to the bottom of the hull with 291 Sikaflex marine adhesive. So most people use this stuff. Fantastic to have on hand anyway if you're mucking around with boats. But let's throw the bilge pump in, and then every bit of wiring is done. Do it. Noisy time. Here we go. Spotola. Done. So the boat's done up until the point of putting seats in. Because I live really remote, I haven't got a place I can get good seats from. I can buy a cheap plastic one. We did have some seats given to us by a mate of ours, but they were quite rotten in the back because there's only chipboard in the back. So we've ordered some new ones. They're on their way, so we've got to wait. So what I've done so far, I've still got some work to do for the trailer, and I've still got a couple of little things to do. But what we've done, we've got the wrap on. We've painted the boat. We've reinforced all the flooring. We've done the EVA foam flooring. One thing I've noticed, I don't know if you can see it here, but there's a line of the flooring, and I'll zoom in so you can see it better. EVA foam flooring has a melting point of 70 degrees, which is no problem out in the heat of Weipa, where I live, or up here on Cape York or the tropics. But when I had it out in the sun, the reflection of the sounder actually bounced back and hit the flooring just here. So I had it out in the sun so the wrap could get a bit of sun on it. And I'm going to just have to make sure I've got a tea towel or something over the sounder. Now, I spoke to a mate of mine who works at H2O Flooring on the Gold Coast, which specialises in EVA foam flooring. And he said it's a problem with all EVA flooring. It's reflected heat, heats up to over 70 degrees, leaves marks like that. So a bit disappointed in that. But what some of the stuff that's done that I've taken you through, most of it Here I've got my battery, all my accessories with my isolator switch there, the bus bar, the fuel tank's in, and I've also got my bilge pump with a hose wraps around the battery there and shoots out the through hull fitting just in here. On this end here, I've got a four-way switch which turns on all my lights in the boat. So that's my nav lights, and I spoke about nav lights, important to get the right ones. I've got the Minn Kota electric motor, and that's set up with a heading sensor just here. So that's pretty important with your Minn Kota. With the sounder, I have side scan on that, as well as chirp and normal sonar. I don't have the live, and I'm probably not going to get the live. I think the live is great, but I think people spend way too much time staring at their sounder, watching fish, and not necessarily catching them. And it's just an observation. I think live is great, but I'm not going to get it. One thing Jeff showed me with my all-round white light or my anchor light, he put a bit of hose on the end and a bit of Sikaflex on the end of that hose, because these have a very delicate plug. It's just a single plug. When you plug it into your socket up the back, and if you get any salt water or corrosion in that, that's the first thing to go. So that's why your anchor light or your all-round light stops working. And if you don't know who Jeff is, just part of my fishing channel. He fishes with me all the time up on Cape York, so people who watch my fishing channel would know Jeff. The boat motor's on, and we did something special with the boat motor I'm going to take through and have a talk to you about. The boat motor normally has a piece of poly or something like that, that where it bolts through the engine and where it sits on the hull itself, or on the transom, I should say, it's got this plate here. Now, I found it really hard to get some just a little bit of thin poly plate in Weeper, so we cut up a chopping board. So chopping board for $20. We cut it to size. It's perfect. It's nice and thick, and we've got the engine bolted for that really neatly. So that's a really good thing. What we're going to do now is I'm going to end this video here, but there's going to be a part 2 where I'm going to work on the trailer. I'm going to do some basic service stuff on the engine. I actually want people to take their engines to a mechanic to get it serviced quite regularly, but if you want to do basic stuff like impellers and spark plugs and things like that, we can go through that, no problem at all. I'm going to do the wiring for the lights and everything on the trailer, and I'm going to show you how to set up a trailer properly. Frenchie mentioned it in the video how we need the trailer to have a lot more support, and there's also an issue with the roller underneath here. This roller you can see here now, it's actually resting on the aluminium instead of the keel running down the middle of the boat. It should just be resting on the keel. So that's why the boat's, this boat over the years has had quite a few cracks in it. So it's been bounced around dirt roads. So we're going to make it bulletproof. So we're going to make the trailer not crack the boat for a start. And we're going to talk about things like unsprung weight and suspension for trailers, and what makes trailers fail, not only on the highway, but especially on dirt roads, because where I live, there's a lot of dirt roads.